Hello, I'm Ronald Day, Associate Vice President of the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy at the Fortune Society, and welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the criminal justice system from various perspectives, including from those most impacted by the system. We discuss critical questions about how the current system works, its intersections with social justice, and highlight the efforts that are being made to improve the lives of everyone that is affected by it. We ask you, the viewer, to spread the word about Both Sides of the Bars and to share your comments with us on Twitter at the Fortune Society. So today we have with us on both sides of the bars two great guests that are going to help us talk about a really important issue, which is fair access to education. So to my immediate left is Bianca Van Heydoorn, who's the Director of Educational Initiatives at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice Prisoner Reentry Institute. And Bianca, among a lot of other affiliations that she has, Bianca currently sits on the advisory board for the Vera Institute's Pathways from Prison to Post-Secondary Education project and the New York Center for New York City Coalition for Higher Education in Prison, and is working with her partners at CUNY to create welcoming campus environments. Thank you, Bianca, for being on both sides of the bars.
Thanks.
And also with me is Mr. David Thorpe, who's the program manager for Training to Work program at the Osborne Association. So David is in his final year of graduate school at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, working on the Masters of Public Administration. Kudos to you. And he graduated from St. John's University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology. He graduated summa cum laude, so that's fantastic. And David also served 22 years in prison. So some point during this conversation, I'd certainly like for you to enlighten us about your experiences as they relate to education in this really important conversation. So fair access to education, right? Right now there's an important conversation that is going on, not just in New York, but around the country, about ensuring that people that have criminal justice system involvement have access to the myriad of services that are currently available. And we know that education is something that is integral for people to achieve the type of success that we want to see people achieve. But we know that there have been many barriers that have been placed in front of people, right, that want to access education. All right, one of the things that has happened in the employment context is something called ban the box, removing the box from the application that asks about criminal convictions. The same thing is happening in education. And so Bianca, you've done a lot of work around ban the box. There's been some guidance that was recently released from the United States Department of Education. So why don't you help frame the conversation for our viewers who don't know a whole lot about education? Because I'll just say, a lot of people end up in the criminal justice system because they have limited education. And we know that there's a school to prison pipeline. There's a significant chance that a person drops out of high school, they end up involved in the criminal justice system. They don't necessarily have to serve a long stint in prison, but there's usually some touch point in the system.
Right.
So I think framing that conversation, how so many people get involved in the system, and then why education is important, is something that we really want to talk about and flesh out for people today.
Yeah, so tall order question,
Yes,
right?
tall order.
So I'll do my best to give the bullet points,
Sure.
right? So I think, you know, one of the things that we know is that there are huge disparities along racial lines, along economic lines in our country, along, you know, a lot of different lines that make it such that some people have incredible access to opportunities and others have very little access to opportunities, right? And so if we narrow that understanding to the education context and the criminal justice context, what we know is that there are folks at every stage of access to education, that brown folks, poor folks, you know, folks who don't have access in other areas also are at a disadvantage educationally, right? We also know that in the criminal justice system, brown folks and poor folks and folks that are disadvantaged in many other ways are highly more likely to have contact at every stage of the criminal justice system than their more wealthy and white counterparts, right? So when you lay those things on top of each other, that folks who have had negative or poor or inadequate access to higher education or education at every level, and are highly likely to have contact with the criminal justice system, what we have are lots of folks in prison who are very undereducated, right?
Yes.
And who multiple systems have kind of failed at every stage of the game.
Yes.
So we've been engaged in, and that's kind of the short, really, you know, inadequate kind of description. So what we've got right now is hyper incarceration, right? What some people call mass incarceration, lots and lots of people in prison. For a very long time, we didn't have access to higher education or really good access to education in prison. There was a period of time where we did have it, and you know, in the early mid-90s, we lost access to higher education specifically. Yeah. So we're in a moment right now where we're learning that a lot of the things that we've done with respect to criminal justice, our criminal justice arena, and what we've done in terms of education have gotten us to the place that we're at right now. And we're in the middle of a movement that is thinking about different ways to do that. And you, I think, mentioned the employment context, and there have been huge rise in the employment context to undo some of the collateral consequences or perpetual punishments, I prefer to say, that will impact people when they return home. And we're now starting to do that, to my excitement, in the education realm. And so I think that's kind of the moment that we're standing at right now, that both at, you know, the local level in New York City, at the state level, and at the national level as well, it's something that we're paying attention to, how to make sure that folks, not just in employment, not just in housing, but really in education, that has an impact on all of those arenas, that folks who have traditionally been left out of that, of access to that, we're thinking about ways to create access.
Thank you for giving that, for that context. And so, David, when we were chatting earlier, I think you made a really important point, because you mentioned the Attica Rebellion, right? Which happened in 1971, and how education in prisons came about in many respects as a result of pressure, right? That was put, people said while they were incarcerated that we want to have access to education. So can you share a little bit about your understanding of how we came to that point, and even how we're at the point now where we need to like strike while the iron is hot, because there is an opportunity. We have people on the left and people on the right paying attention to this. Some people to say that it has a lot to do with us not being able to afford to continue to incarcerate people at the rates that we do. But still, at any, however you look at it, it's still an opportunity. So I definitely love to hear your perspective.
So from the very start of our conversation, I was excited because we had was thinking in similar terms, right? Yes. So like, one of my filters, having been incarcerated, is looking at the protracted struggle of so-called prisoners' rights. And with the Attica riots, you saw a lot of programming. You saw the creation of grievance committees, liaison committees that try to negotiate certain terms with the administration. You saw so-called inmate organizations, right? And so they flourished for a time, and there was this transformation, I guess, right? This renaissance, if you can say that, look at it that way. And so in 1994, incarcerated, they were talking about removing the Pell Grants. And never thought that would happen. Myself, I had taken advantage of the Pell Grants while incarcerated. So I served 22 years. One was a 6-year sentence that I did, and a subsequent sentence was 14 and a half year, 14-year, 9-month sentence. So, but during the 6 years, I attended a couple of programs, a couple at Elmira, one at Greenhaven, and one at Arthur Kill. And so I ultimately graduated from St. John's and was working as a graduate assistant when I was released, and just had a relationship, and got into had to leave school to work, and so some other pitfalls fell upon me. I started making some bad choices regarding money, and ended up with the 14-year sentence, serving 14 years at 9 months. But looking at, so it was toward the last sentence that I was seeing the Pell Grant removed, and so looking at, you know, the poor choices I made, having benefited from it, you know, and then seeing people denied that opportunity that I had was riveting, and I never thought they would do it because I thought it was so successful. You know, so I was probably part of the 2% or the 1%, right? So that was right around the time when, you know, the campaign for fiscal equity was challenging the funding that the city was receiving for education, and so Livertaki made a comment about so a New York City kid is only entitled to an 8th grade education, and so it's kind of funny, right, that was around that time, and like in Department of Corrections, if you can learn at an 8th grade level, you can sign yourself out, and so they don't make you go. So they make you go into that stage, but so now to see all this energy and people have gotten involved in this struggle and to see what's going on, is very excited about it, and so it's very important, you know, like so that people that are looking to go to college or looking to advance themselves have access to these programs that help you get enrolled in school and help you deal with difficult questions. And because one of the most difficult things is how to have enough esteem to really talk about what you've been through, the mistakes you've made, and where you are at now. And so yeah, so in terms of that, education being a very important component of reentry. And I think in a lot of ways we figured out some things, and we're still figuring out some other things, and so very good, vibrant time for.
Thank you, and I'd definitely like to come back to ask you how education directly impacted your life. But Bianca, you know, one of the things I want to say is there's this, again, conversation that's going on about reforming the criminal justice system. And some of the, you know, academics and other folks, you know, say a lot of it has to do with the policies that got us into the predicament that we are in now, but that we need education and we need other, you know, be it employment and housing, we need folks to have access to these so that they could have a much smoother transition if they're coming out of prison, but also no matter where they had criminal justice system involvement, that they still have access to education. So you're working now with the Prison Reentry Institute. You're ensuring that people who are inside get the access. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how important it is that individuals who are incarcerated, even though David mentioned the Pell Grants were removed from, access was removed from the prisons. You know, what is it that's happening now that John Jay is represented at the prisons, for example?
Right. So I appreciate that question, and it all kind of is I think I want my response to be in context, right?
Yeah,
so. You know, in 2011, the Prisoner Reentry Institute, along with Boz Dreisinger, who's a faculty member at John Jay, started the Prison to College Pipeline. And the idea really kind of sparked out of this notion of, well, if we're a public university and we're John Jay College of Criminal Justice, right? And we're faced with this mass incarceration, what is our role, right? What role should we be playing in ensuring that folks, particularly folks who are coming back to New York City, are able to successfully reintegrate? Like, what role does the public university play? And so that the Prison to College Pipeline was kind of born out of that. And, you know, as an initiative, we are designed as a reentry initiative. So we're working with men at one correctional facility, Otisville Correctional Facility, where the students take credit-bearing courses. The faculty travel up to the facility. They're taking credit-bearing courses where they begin their college career while they're incarcerated. We work with some community-based organizations and folks at DOCS to ensure that students are transitioned out, and we help work with them through the other project that I oversee, College Initiative, to ensure that they make a successful transition to CUNY or another institution in the community. And the idea behind that is that there is something valuable about using the time in prison to start your education and to have that opportunity. And there's also something really valuable about the campus experience. That's where we got our mentors, right? That's how we figured out, you know, what we wanted to do, or, you know, where we got to experiment with things. And we want, you know, our students to have that experience as well. So we initially intentionally designed it to be a reentry initiative so that you're getting both sides of the bars, right? Exactly. That you're getting that experience on both sides. And also intentionally designed it that way because as a public institution, we do have a responsibility to be inclusive, right? And we wanted to create opportunities on our campuses that understood that this is a particularly vulnerable population, a population that's underserved, right? And that our campuses should also be welcoming environments.
Yeah, I mean, CUNY, as you said, as a public institution, is in a city where there's been a tremendous amount of impact of the system. So it behooves the university to be inclusive to the extent that you're mentioning.
Yeah.
And so, David, I want to ask you a question about, because you, as a program manager at the Osborne Association, are serving people who are coming out of the system, and they're looking for workforce development services, but ultimately they need education as well, because we know sometimes people are stagnant, right, with respect to opportunities when their education is limited.
Right.
So what are you doing in the program that addresses, those issues and allows for people to
Sure. So when a person comes in, we give them do an assessment and find out what their strengths and challenges are, and see how they might ultimately obtain a career. All right. I think that previously you had workforce development philosophy was job driven, and so now there's this idea of career pathways, and so looking for a career ladder for a person. And so normally the first thing we look at are the educational level. And so you come in, you do a tape test to find out what level they're at. Most of our participants tend to have a high school diploma, especially the ones coming from the federal prison. They tend to all. Then those that don't, we identify what, they've done in the prison that might help them, because a lot of times a person will have a hobby, right? But you can't work at that hobby, won't pay you no money. And so our focus is to see what type of vocational skills they may need or had while incarcerated. Most people have been a porter or they've worked in the mess hall, so they have food service. So we try to identify their strengths in either regard, and normally it's easy to get a job. It's easy for us to get them placed, the first placement. And the challenge is to get them into a job that's a living wage, right? And so this is why we stress the career ladder. And so after they get the first job, we usually stress education, further education. We've used the college initiative. We've used the college community network. And so we try to encourage them, that this is what's going to get you to the next level. Because everybody can't work in construction, and everyone doesn't want to be a chef, and it was a life being a porter, right? Yeah. Unless you're a supervisor or something of that nature. So always express the importance, and so the importance of education, for me, has just been tremendous, because it's allowed me to see, okay, sure, someone's trusted me, they've given me a job, and so now I need to be able to pay my bills and to support my family, and then to live a better life. So ultimately, in addition to increasing public safety, really going at the educational vocational piece kind of hard, is just makes common sense. And so we really push them to still hustle, but the hustle by working and increasing your level of knowledge and your toolkit, as the case may be, so that you can have a living wage.
And so there's a move right now, Bianca, in the state to try to, the fair access to education is actually a bill that's before the state legislature that would remove the box from the applications, right, at all colleges and universities in the state. And so can you explain to the audience a little bit about that and how that would impact people who have criminal justice system involvement?
Yeah, so the Fair Access to Education Act seeks to add an additional piece, right? So we've got, back to the employment context, right? So we've got Article 23A that gives lots of guidance and do's and don'ts about what employers can do around the box and folks' criminal convictions. And this would, in essence, be Article 23B, right? That would say there should not be a box on any application. Schools, colleges, and universities should not ask about someone's criminal conviction in the admissions process, right? It says that you should not ask at any point in the admissions process. It should not be a determining factor in whether you offer someone admissions. It should also not be a determining factor in rescinding admissions. And that, it does say that colleges and universities can take someone's criminal history into account in making other decisions, for example, decisions around housing, decisions around campus-based programming, but even all of that, kind of harking back to Article 23A in the employment sector, the guidance in this proposed bill is that you want to make a direct connection between what that activity is or any of that and the person's criminal history. And what this has the possibility to do is really open up, nothing's a panacea, right? Nothing is a kind of cure-all, but what this would do is create it would mitigate what some folks are calling the chilling effect, right? So if I go to fill out a college application, I see that box and I know that I have to check yes on that box. I might, not continue that application, and the Center for Community Alternatives did a report that showed that 2/3 of the folks who applied to the State University of New York didn't complete the application after seeing that box, right? So it would do a lot to reduce the chilling effect and provide access to more people to college.
Exactly. And so part of the reason that the box is there is because administrators are saying it's about campus safety, but the report also said that there's no correlation between people who have been convicted of crimes and campuses being less safe.
Right.
So campuses who have the box versus those who don't have the box, there are no differences.
Right. And the other thing that they brought up in the report is that when you do look at incidents of crime and particularly incidents of violence on college campuses, that by far those acts are committed by folks who don't have a criminal history, right? Some folks say, first-time offender, we don't know that, right? But someone who doesn't have a conviction history, by and large. At CUNY, at the City University of New York, we don't have a box on our application. We're one of the largest university systems, in the country, and also one of the safest. So there are other ways to be thinking about campus safety, and I think that we could be way more creative and way more efficient at ensuring campus safety if we were thinking about things that aren't as easy as putting a box on an application.
Yeah, I mean, the default should be to accept students. I mean, if you are filling out an application and thinking about going to college, then that means that your mindset is such that you see the importance of of education.
Right.
So David, I mean, you have some experience, as you alluded to earlier, with education. Can you tell us about how has education impacted you?
It's enabled me to get a job, first of all. And
you don't think you would have been able to get a job without education?
so, no, I wasn't too much of I did some construction when I was like 16, 17, but I wasn't a physical type of person. And it's funny, I was always good in school when I went. I remember being in high school, I was on a 43 N list. And that meant you were absent 43 times. It's all through when I was 17, I was encouraged to take the high school equivalency exam, and so that's what I did. But for me, being able just to communicate and to be on a level where I can use my critical thinking and being able to communicate with other people, being able to do some of the things that some of the work I really want to do, like the work I'm doing, has been a large part for my inspiration, my desire, and my push. And what I see every day is I see potential in everyone that comes to the program. And the real question for them, they'll get a resume and they'll get some mock interviewing, but the real question for them is their self-esteem and what they think they can achieve. And a lot of times when you get to that point where you're reconciling some of the things that have happened to you, you think no one else will give you a chance. And so it's just like, even though you're home, you go into a different type of prison. So being able to gain education, like I remember when I applied for John Jay, the question wasn't on there. So I was like, waiting for it. So I'm going to explain this stuff, and and it never came up. And and being able to go back on campus, being able to get that second chance was just tremendous for me as a person, as a human being, and for my family. I vote, and so. But education is important, and so especially if you want to have a living wage. So there are a lot of self-sufficiency calculators where you can go in, like it's on the Department of Labor website, you could go in and figure out how much money do I need to make to pay for this apartment, have my cell phone, eat. And so those are real things, and so just promising a person or convincing a person a job, any job will do, because it won't at the end of the day. And so that's how education has been important for me, is that it's allowed me to advance in a career that I love, and to support myself and my family. And so it's tremendous. And so
thank you for that. We have a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to make a point that, so there have been some shifts in the thinking of some of our policymakers, and it has a lot to do with the work that you do. So for example, people would come home from incarceration and they would want to go to college, and they would be told, no, you need to get a job. And so it's very discouraging to have a passion for education and to be told, no, you need to be able to pay your parole fees, so you need to get a job and so forth. So there has been a shift in that thinking, so I think that's important, because a lot of times, the way I see it is, there's some extrinsic motivation to get a job. It's like you gotta pay parole fees if you're on parole, you have to pay bills and all these other obligations. There's a lot of intrinsic motivation to get an education, because hold up, there's all of this work that goes into that. There's all this, I mean, considerable amount of effort. So you know, I've raised that point, and then the shift in the policy I think is important. So can you tell us a story of someone who's come through the prison to college pipeline and who's been successful in a little bit of time that we have?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of, you know, I'm really excited both, there's exciting things happening both at the Prison to College Pipeline and at College Initiative, where it's graduation season, right?
That's right.
So at College Initiative, we're 22 folks are graduating this year. It's going to take us over the 300 mark of degrees earned by our students since 2002, which is remarkable. And on the Prison to College Pipeline side, we've had our first graduate who's come through completely through the program and earned his degree in the community, graduated with honors from Hostos Community College. We have another graduate coming up next year with a BA from John Jay. So there's really, I mean, lots. And what I would say about the community in Prison to College Pipeline and the College Initiative community is that folks don't just graduate and go on and leave, right? They come back and give back to the community and support, right? Which then creates that title shift. We can do the work, yeah, but it's the folks who are coming who have that direct experience, who are feeding into the pool each time, that are really pushing the needle.
Exactly. Well, we out of time. This conversation can go on until perpetuity, as far as I'm concerned, and we want to continue to have the conversation. But thank you, David Thorpe, for being on the show. Thank you, Bianca Van Heydoorn, representing CUNY, representing Prison Reentry Institute, representing the Osborne Association. Thank you. So thanks, David Thorpe and Bianca Van Heydoorn, for joining us on both sides of the bars today. And thank you in TV land for joining us as well. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please check us out on the website at fortunesociety.org or on Facebook by typing in the Fortune Society. This is Ronald Day as we critically look at both sides of the bars.